back to my channel. It's been a minute, it's been a while, but you know, nothing really has been going on in my life to talk about except for work. So after around 2.5 years of Korea being virtually closed to all kinds of tourism, we are finally starting to see some tourists back in Korea, though nobody's come to visit me. Anyway, so I thought that I would make a video on travel tips that you should know before coming to Korea if you are interested in visiting. Now, if you Google, you know, let's look at the first thing, 10 trip tips to avoid looking like a tourist in South Korea, you kind of get a lot of the same results every single time. Dress conservatively, take off your shoes. You're not gonna have to take off your shoes in Korea unless you're going to someone's house or a very traditional old style restaurant. I can count the restaurants I've been into where I had to take off my shoes on one hand, and I've been here for 5 years now. So it's pretty rare that you have to take off your shoes. No tip required, personal space, dress. You know, there's a lot of reoccurring tips that I see all the time. Respect elders, move and don't sit in the pregnancy seats. These kind of tips are really, really common, but there are these tips that I feel like everybody should know because they're really useful, but they never come up in these kind of articles. Probably because the people writing the articles just don't know. These aren't huge faux pas, and you're not gonna be shunned if you do these, but I think they're important tips to know that you probably won't find anywhere else. Take it from a local. Oh my god, am I a local? For me, a lot of these tips are second nature and something I don't think about, but every once in a while I'll notice somebody not doing this and it'll tick me off and I'll be like, "Darn, somebody should have told them." Now, obviously, I'm from America, so all of my perspectives of what tourists might be thinking are Western and American based. Obviously, if you're coming from a different culture that is not Western or American, you're probably gonna have a little bit of a difference, but I think some of these are universally applicable. The number one biggest tip is actually something that's very small, but it literally haunts me. So my parents have come and visit me in Korea, my sister has come and visited me in Korea, and my best friend Effie has come and visited me in Korea. And every single one of them, I tell them one thing: do not press the crosswalk buttons.
Don't do it.
So I'm very passionate about this. It's like the bane of my existence. So in America, and I think in a lot of cultures as well, I'm not super sure, but usually in crosswalks in America, if there's a button, you press it because you're like, "Hi, I'm waiting at the crosswalk," and then it tells the traffic light that somebody's waiting. Now, when I first came to Korea, I used to push the button because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna cross. And now looking back on it, I'm so embarrassed. The reason there are buttons at crosswalks in South Korea is actually an accessibility feature for people who are visually impaired. That means that when you do press the button, it doesn't make it go any faster. But what it does do is when it is your turn to cross, it'll let out a beep, 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 and it's very loud. And it's like beep, 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 beep. And it does that the whole time that the crosswalk is green for you to cross. Obviously, there's no problem with you pushing this button if you want to, but I think you should maybe know that if you do press the buttons, it will not make the crosswalk cycle through any faster, and it will just play a very loud, kind of obnoxious little beep. Another note about sidewalks and navigating the city of Seoul in particular is that sidewalks are for cars, not people. Sidewalks are for cars. The first day I came to Korea, I remember I went to my house and I lived in this back little neighborhood, and I asked a coworker who was showing me around, I said, "Where are all the sidewalks?" And he laughed at me. Because there's no sidewalks in the back streets. And the sidewalks on the big main streets, if you're somewhere around in Gangnam or somewhere that has quite a lot of big long streets, there's gonna be quite a wide sidewalk going along there. However, you should know that is for cars, that is for bikes, scooters, kickboards, or the electric scooters. I don't know what they call them in English. Electric scooters? But then what would a scooter be? Oh. Anyway, so people will drive on the sidewalks. People will pull up and drive on the sidewalks. People will park on the sidewalks. Proceed with caution, you know? All the time, there's a lot of things going on on the sidewalks in Korea, so even though you are in a pedestrian zone, please be aware of any other motorized vehicles that could be going along with you. There's a lot of delivery food in Korea, and so there's a lot of little Vespa, scooter, bike type things. They can go really fast down some of the sidewalks, and it can be dangerous if they're coming up behind you. You don't hear them listening to music, so always try and keep your wits about you on the sidewalks in Korea. And in general, I'd say. You might not get pickpocketed, but you might get hit by a delivery man. So, choose your battles. The next tip that you should try and maybe avoid if you're in Korea is talking on the phone on public transportation. Now, if you're here for a little bit, you might not have a phone number, but if you're here in Korea for a longer stay, it's pretty easy to get one of those SIM cards at a KT or like SKT or LGU Plus, a local network provider, and you know, hook up a temporary phone number. But it's actually considered rude to talk on the phone on public transportation, especially on buses. People will sometimes talk on the phone on the subway, I think it's more common, but on the bus, it's not really that common. In fact, one time I was talking on the phone with a Korean friend of mine. I got on the bus, I told them I got on the bus. I was like, oh yeah, I'm on the bus now. I'm gonna be home soon. And then they're like, okay, you should hang up. I'll text you. You shouldn't talk on the phone on the bus. Now, it's not like this is illegal. Nobody's gonna give you a fine. I don't think it's written in the rules anywhere, but none of these tips are really written in the rules. It's a person by person basis to what you should not do. Just culturally. However, I have had friends who have been reprimanded, let's put that lightly, reprimanded, yelled at by bus drivers because they were talking on the phone on the bus. It depends on your bus driver, it depends on the people around you. You might get scolded if you're talking on the phone on public transportation. I generally try and avoid it if possible. But a short conversation, really, if you're like quiet about it, you'll probably be fine, but it's best to just avoid it. Another tip for navigating Korea that people might not know is that you don't really eat while you walk. So I didn't even think of this one, but I was sitting in a taco restaurant. I was sitting in Masa Tacos. Shout out Masa Tacos. Go get your tacos. I was sitting in Masa Tacos having lunch with a friend, and I saw this guy, ostensibly American looking guy, walking down the street eating something. I had a reaction to him eating. I was like, oh, look at this guy. And then I realized, that's weird. I'm pretty sure in America it's okay to eat and walk. Like if you pick up, like, I don't know, what would you eat on the road? Like a hot dog? This is another one of those situations where people aren't gonna like stop you and yell at you and call the police. But they might look at you a little bit weird. Now, sometimes I do drink and walk. If I have an iced coffee, I'll drink and walk. But that's still a little bit weird. You won't see that many people eating or drinking while they're walking from place to place. Usually if you're eating street food, you eat it at the cart, but generally people get their food, go to a second location, sit down, or, you know, find a spot and eat it. They usually don't eat in transit here. Also, pro tip, drinking and even bringing beverages is prohibited on, I believe, both buses and trains. I know buses for sure, but I'm not sure about trains. They're very strict about what kind of drinks you can and cannot bring. On the bus, they need to have a cover on them. You know, it can't be one of the open ones with a straw. It needs to be fully covered. So no bringing ice Americanos on the buses, because the bus driver will stop you and will not let you get on the bus. I've seen it happen to people. So that's also a pro tip, no eating or drinking. Obviously you need your mask on the bus these days anyway, so what would you be doing? The next one isn't really a tip so much as it's like a warning. Not really like it's something that you have to watch out for, but maybe it's something that could be a little bit surprising if you're coming from certain other cultures. People spit. This is something that I don't think I'll ever get used to, is people, predominantly men, older men usually, spit. They have no problem just like spitting on the sidewalk wherever they are. Right in front of you, in a street, like anywhere outside that you can spit, they will just spit on the ground. and nobody thinks it's weird, and they just go about their normal life. So if you see people just spitting on the ground, it's kind of normal. There have been quite a few times where I notice an attractive man from, you know, across the street, and then he just goes and spits on the ground, and it's really gross to me. But it's something very common that you'll see a lot in Korea. Another thing that might surprise specifically Americans when coming to Korea is the safety, the culture of safety. Now, the university where I went to had something called an honor code. So people would just leave their stuff and go and come back, and your stuff would be there. And that was it was a college town, so it worked within the campus. But obviously, I think most people would agree that real life is kind of different in actual society. You can't just leave your stuff in a cafe, go run an errand, and expect it to be there. It's not realistic. No matter how safe your town is, probably not the best idea. However, in Korea, people generally feel very safe. There's not a lot of theft. People will leave their stuff and then go out and take a phone call, or go out of the cafe for a smoke, or go to the convenience store and buy something and come back. I've done it before. I was stressed out the whole time. I was at a cafe near my house. I had my laptop. I was ready to do my work. I had my charger, and I realized I had forgot my mouse, my Bluetooth mouse, at my house. I just left my stuff in the cafe, hightailed it back home, grabbed my mouse, and came right back to the cafe. In Korea, there's CCTV everywhere, so even if somebody does take your stuff, they can track them and find out who it was. So people generally don't steal possessions in public places like that. You still run the risk of having your things be taken, but if you see somebody leave their stuff in a cafe, chances are they're coming back because they just do that. I've seen somebody leave their Mercedes running, keys in, door open, parked like in the street, and then they went into the convenience store to get something and left it there for like a good few minutes, running with the keys in the ignition. Like, how can you live like that? Anyway, okay. So another thing that's kind of, it's not really a tip, but it's something that might surprise you, is strollers. Now, you'll see people with strollers and you think baby, but what's in it? A dog. I don't know if this is common in America, but it's very, very common in Korea. People will push their dogs around in strollers on the street. So if you see a stroller, just know it could be a baby, it could be a dog. I think, you know, when going to a culture that's not your own, it's important to know as much as you can before going so you don't make people mad. But old women will push you either way, no matter how nice you are. So that's also something you need to watch out for. So if you want to visit Korea, I highly recommend it. Although not right now, it's raining, but maybe in a few months when the weather cools down. Those are just some tips that you won't find anywhere else on the internet. So I hope they helped you out a little bit if you're thinking of coming to Korea one day. Or maybe if you already live here, let me know. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later with a vlog from a pool party and a music festival coming up later this summer. I've got some exciting plans. See you later. Bye bye.